picture this. You fought your way through the decay and rot that consumes Caelid, that crimson wasteland where even the air itself seems diseased. You've scaled the divine tower, ascending those ancient steps while fending off the corrupted soldiers who guard its heights. And there, at the pinnacle of this forsaken spire, you discover something extraordinary. A colossal sword, black as the void between stars, its blade inscribed with an intricate helix pattern that seems to writhe in the dying light. This is the Godslayer's greatsword, and when you grasp its hilt, you feel the faintest echo of something that should not exist in the lands between. You feel the remnant of a power that once made the gods themselves tremble. Welcome, lore seekers, to another deep dive with Keen 7 Lore, where today we unravel one of Elden Ring's most enigmatic mysteries, the story of the Gloam-Eyed Queen and her devoted Godskins. This is a tale that Queen Marika herself tried to erase from history, a narrative so threatening to the Golden Order that its very mention became taboo. Yet like all buried truths in From Software's worlds, the evidence of this forgotten queen persists in the margins, in the shadows, in the very fabric of the world itself, if you know where to look. The Gloam-Eyed Queen represents something unprecedented in the hierarchy of the lands between, an Empyrean who not only challenged Marika's rule, but came terrifyingly close to ending it entirely. She wielded the power of Destined death itself, that fundamental force that Marika had torn from the Elden Ring to create her age of immortality. And through this stolen death, the Queen forged weapons capable of the ultimate blasphemy, the murder of gods. Think about what that means for a moment. In a world where divinity equals absolute power, where gods shape reality through their very will, this mysterious queen possessed the means to end them permanently. Not banish, not seal, not transform, but kill, with all the finality that word implies. Her black flames didn't just burn flesh, they burned away the very essence of godhood itself, reducing immortals to mortality's ultimate expression. Death. The scattered Godskins we encounter throughout our journey, those grotesque nobles who stretch their bodies into impossible shapes, those lean apostles who move with serpentine grace, these are the orphaned children of that lost crusade. They continue their grim work even now, centuries after their mother's defeat, skinning corpses and wearing the flesh of their victims as holy vestments. They are living monuments to a forgotten war, a conflict that determined whether the lands between would embrace the natural cycle of death or remain frozen in Marika's golden eternity. As we piece together this buried history, we'll discover connections that reshape our understanding of the entire game. We'll explore evidence suggesting the Gloam-Eyed Queen didn't simply disappear, but may walk among us still, transformed and diminished, but not destroyed. We'll examine how her legacy influences every aspect of death and divinity in the lands between. And we'll confront the uncomfortable truth that in Elden Ring's world of moral ambiguity, the queen who sought to kill gods might not have been the villain Marika's history makes her out to be. To understand the Gloam-Eyed Queen, we must first understand what made her such an existential threat to the Golden Order. She wasn't merely a powerful enemy or a rival demigod. She was an Empyrean, chosen by the Two Fingers themselves as a candidate to succeed Queen Marika. The game tells us this explicitly through the Godskin Apostle armor set, which describes her as an Empyrean who once held the power of Destined death. This single fact reshapes everything about her story. Empyreans in Elden Ring aren't simply powerful beings, they're individuals with the potential to become true gods, to establish new orders that would fundamentally reshape reality itself. We know of only a handful of confirmed Empyreans: Marika herself, her children, Rune, Miquella, and Melina, and now this mysterious Gloam. Each represents not just a person, but a possible future for the world itself. Rune seeks an age of stars and cold dark moon. Miquella envisions an age of compassion, unmarred by the influences of outer gods. Melina embodies the scarlet rot that would consume all things. And the Gloam-Eyed Queen? She represented the return of natural death to a world that had forgotten how to die. The name itself, Gloam-Eyed, carries profound meaning. Gloam refers to twilight, that liminal moment between day and night when the world exists in a state of transition. It's neither fully light nor fully dark, but something altogether different, something in between. This twilight symbolism permeates everything about the queen and her followers. She existed in the space between life and death, between mortality and divinity, between the old order and the new. Her very existence was transitional, transformative, dangerous to established hierarchies. Early versions of the game referred to her as the Dusk-Eyed Queen, reinforcing this twilight imagery. Other cut content called her the Queen in Black, emphasizing her connection to the darkness that Marika's golden light sought to banish. These aren't just poetic descriptions. They're fundamental to understanding what she represented. Where Marika brought the harsh, unwavering light of gold, the Gloam-Eyed Queen brought the gentle darkness of endings, the peaceful twilight where all things find rest. But how did an Empyrean chosen by the very same two fingers that served Marika come to oppose the Golden Order so violently? The answer lies in the Rune of Death itself. When Marika first established her rule, she made a decision that would define her entire age. She removed the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. This wasn't simply hiding death away, it was fundamentally altering the nature of existence in the lands between. Without destined death as part of the natural order, nothing could truly die. Demigods became eternal, their souls returning even if their bodies were destroyed. The natural cycle of life and death, that fundamental rhythm that governs all existence, was broken. The Rune of Death didn't simply vanish when Marika removed it. Like all aspects of the Elden Ring, it remained a tangible force, a physical manifestation of conceptual power. And somehow, through means the game never fully explains, this rune came into the possession of the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Some sources suggest she discovered it, others that it was granted to her, but the result was the same. An Empyrean with the power to kill gods now existed in a world where gods had made themselves unkillable. Consider the philosophical implications of this moment. The Gloam-Eyed Queen didn't see herself as a destroyer, but as a restorer of natural order. The Godskin Apostle's set tells us her followers were the death of the gods, not murderers, but death itself, the natural end that comes to all things. In their worldview, Marika's removal of death wasn't a triumph, but a perversion, a violation of the fundamental laws that govern existence. Gods were never meant to be eternal. Nothing was meant to be eternal. Everything that begins must end. This is the truth the Queen sought to restore. The power she wielded through the Rune of Death manifested as the Black Flame, perhaps the most feared force in the history of the lands between. This wasn't ordinary fire, wasn't even magical fire in the traditional sense. The Black Flame was the physical manifestation of destined death itself, shaped into a weapon that could end immortality. The game's descriptions make this terrifyingly clear. Before Maliketh sealed destined death, the Black Flame could kill gods. If you're finding value in uncovering these hidden histories of the lands between, consider subscribing to support the channel and join our growing community of lore enthusiasts. Your support truly makes these deep investigations into gaming's deepest mysteries possible. The Black Flame incantations we can learn and use in the game are pale shadows of what they once were. The Godskin Apostle's cookbook tells us that after destined death was sealed away, the Black Flame lost its true power. What we wield is merely an echo, a remnant that still burns with unholy fire but lacks the god-killing potency it once possessed. Imagine facing an enemy wielding the original Black Flame, fire that wouldn't just damage your health bar but could permanently end your existence, denying even the grace of resurrection. This is what the gods faced during the Gloam-Eyed Queen's crusade. The Queen channeled this power through specific weapons and techniques that her followers still use today. The Godslayer's greatsword, that colossal blade hidden away in Caelid's divine tower, was her primary weapon. Its unique skill, the Queen's Black Flame, shows us how she fought. Not with wild, uncontrolled conflagrations, but with precise, ritualistic movements that shaped death itself into blade and fire. The weapon art has the wielder thrust the sword skyward before bringing it down in an arc that releases a wave of black fire. It's almost ceremonial, like a religious rite transformed into violence. But the black flame wasn't just a tool of destruction, it was a sacred element in the Queen's religious order. The Godskins didn't simply use black flame, they worshipped it, meditated upon it, shaped their entire existence around it. The black flame ritual incantation describes how they would summon circles of black fire in their ceremonies, creating spaces where the power of destined death could manifest. These weren't just combat techniques, but religious observances, ways of communing with the fundamental force of ending that their queen embodied. The protection incantations associated with the black flame reveal another layer of this religious practice. Black flame's protection doesn't shield the user from physical harm, but specifically guards against holy damage, the power of the Erd Tree, and the Golden Order. This tells us the Godskins didn't see themselves as aggressors, but as defenders against what they viewed as the unnatural tyranny of eternal life. Every incantation, every technique, every ritual was part of a greater theological framework that positioned death not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a sacred force to be restored. To understand the Godskins themselves, we must examine their transformed yet fascinating nature. These weren't simply followers or soldiers. They were children, raised from infancy by the Gloam-Eyed Queen herself to become living weapons against divinity. The Godskin swaddling cloth, a sacred relic they carry, tells us the Queen would wrap newborn apostles in this cloth made from supple skin. The imagery is simultaneously maternal and monstrous, a mother caring for her children by wrapping them in the flayed flesh of her enemies. This process of creating Godskins began in infancy but continued throughout their lives. The game tells us they engaged in ritual metamorphosis, incorporating inhuman physiology into their bodies. They gained the ability to stretch their forms like the man-serpents of Gelmir, their bodies becoming elastic and impossible. Watch a Godskin noble in combat, and you'll see this transformation in action, their corpulent forms stretching and rolling, defying physics and anatomy alike. This wasn't natural mutation, but deliberate transformation, a conscious choice to abandon humanity in service of their divine mission. The connection to serpents runs deeper than just physical similarity. The Godskin nobles' ability to stretch and contort mirrors the man-serpents, but it also connects to the ancient power of the Crucible, that primordial force of life from which all things emerged. The Crucible represented life in its raw, unfiltered state, chaotic, ever-changing, infinite impossibility. The Godskins' transformations echo this primordial chaos, their bodies becoming fluid and mutable like life itself. Yet they served death. This paradox sits at the heart of their nature, beings of infinite physical possibility devoted to the ultimate limitation of mortality. Each type of Godskin served a different role in the Queen's hierarchy. The Godskin nobles were the first, the most ancient servants who had known the Queen at the height of her power. Their corpulent forms speak to indulgence, to an era when they freely hunted gods and grew fat on divine flesh. They wear robes sewn from the skin of their victims, each fold and drape a trophy of a deity brought low. The game describes them as highborn, suggesting they held positions of authority and respect in the Queen's order. The Godskin apostles, by contrast, are lean and serpentine, their bodies built for swift, precise violence. Where the nobles embody ancient authority, the apostles represent dedicated purpose. They were the next generation, raised from birth to be weapons. The Queen cradled them as infants, shaped them as children, transformed them into instruments of divine death. Their movements in combat are almost dance-like, spinning their twin blades in elaborate patterns that speak to years of training and conditioning. Every motion has been practiced thousands of times until violence became as natural as breathing. The relationship between the Queen and her Godskins was deeply personal. She didn't simply command them, she raised them, nurtured them, transformed them. The Godskin swaddling cloth's description uses the word cradled, evoking intimate maternal care. Yet this motherhood was monstrous, raising children to become killers of gods. The Godskins called her mother, and she called them her children, but this family was built on death and dedication to a cause that would reshape the world. This brings us to the god hunts themselves, the campaigns of divine assassination that nearly brought the Golden Order to its knees. The Godskins didn't simply kill gods, they hunted them, pursued them with the dedication of religious zealots and the skill of trained assassins. The game tells us through various item descriptions that dozens of gods fell during these hunts. Their skins were flayed and sewn into the robes the Godskins wore, transforming divine flesh into symbols of victory and warning. We can still find evidence of these hunts throughout the lands between. The Damanula village, also known as the Windmill village, provides disturbing insight into how widespread the Godskin influence became. The village women dance endlessly around their windmills, their faces stretched into permanent smiles as they skin and flay anyone who enters their domain. They're not Godskins themselves, but they've adopted their practices, their religious observations. The entire village has been converted to the worship of skinning, of the sacred act of removing flesh from bone. Even their festival decorations are made from human skin, stretched and dried and hung like banners. The spread of such practices suggests the Gloam-Eyed Queen's influence extended far beyond her immediate followers. Common people, perhaps seeking power or purpose or simply swept up in religious fervor, began adopting Godskin rituals. The skinning wasn't just violence, it was theological statement. By removing the skin of gods and wearing it as clothing, the Godskins demonstrated that divinity was just another form of flesh, subject to death like everything else. The god hunts also attracted those who had their own reasons for opposing the Golden Order. The fire monks, dedicated to keeping the flame of Rune contained, found themselves drawn to the black flame's power. The spirit Ashes of Aemon, a fire monk who became enthralled by the black flame, tells this story. Here was a monk whose entire purpose was containing dangerous fire, yet when confronted with the black flame of the Godskins, he abandoned his post and embraced it. The black flame wasn't just powerful, it was seductive, offering a truth that resonated with those who questioned Marika's order. During the height of the god hunts, the lands between must have been a realm of terror for the divine. Imagine being a minor god or demigod, knowing that somewhere out there, hunters wearing the skins of your peers were coming for you. The Godskins were methodical, patient, inevitable. They studied their targets, learned their weaknesses, waited for the perfect moment to strike. And when they did, their black flame ensured that death was permanent. No resurrection, no return, no second chance. Just ending. The psychological warfare was as powerful as the physical threat. Every god killed and skinned became a message to the others. You are not eternal. You are not invincible. You are meat and flesh like everything else. The robes made from divine skin weren't just trophies, they were propaganda, walking reminders that godhood offered no protection from the destined death the queen wielded. But this reign of terror couldn't last. Queen Marika, faced with an existential threat to her Golden Order, deployed her most powerful weapon, Maliketh, her shadow-bound beast and half-brother. The game tells us definitively that Maliketh defeated the Gloam-Eyed Queen, though the exact details of their battle remained frustratingly vague. What we know is that it was decisive. Maliketh not only defeated the queen but sealed the rune of death within his own black blade, ensuring that its power could never again be used against the gods. The nature of shadow-bound beasts like Maliketh makes this victory particularly significant. Shadows are given to Empyreans by the two fingers as both protectors and potential executioners. If an Empyrean goes against the greater will's design, their shadow is empowered to stop them. Maliketh's victory over the Gloam-Eyed Queen might not have been simply Marika defending her rule. It might have been the greater will itself deciding that the queen's vision of restored death was not the future it desired for the lands between. The battle between Maliketh and the Gloam-Eyed Queen must have been apocalyptic. Here were two beings wielding the full power of destined death, one seeking to spread it, the other to contain it. The black blade that Maliketh wields even now contains the rune of death that once empowered the queen's black flames. Every swing of that blade carries the weight of that ancient conflict, the echo of a battle that determined whether gods would live or die. What happened to the Gloam-Eyed Queen after her defeat remains one of Elden Ring's greatest mysteries. The game never explicitly states that she died, only that she was defeated. This ambiguity has fueled countless theories, but one stands out for the compelling evidence supporting it: the connection between the Gloam-Eyed Queen and Melina, the mysterious maiden who guides us throughout our journey. The evidence linking Melina to the Gloam-Eyed Queen is substantial and multifaceted. First, consider Melina's own words about her condition. She describes herself as burned and bodiless, existing in a state between life and death. This could easily describe someone who was struck down by destined death, but not entirely destroyed, their body burned away by black flame, but their spirit persisting. The game tells us that in the land of shadow, all manners of death wash up, suggesting that beings connected to death might persist in altered forms rather than simply ceasing to exist. Then there's the matter of Melina's eye. Throughout most of the game, her left eye remains closed, but in the frenzied flame ending, when she vows to deliver destined death to the player, that eye opens to reveal a dark purple iris, gloam-colored, the color of twilight. This is the only time in the game we see anyone with explicitly gloam-colored eyes, creating a direct visual link to the Gloam-Eyed Queen. The fact that this revelation comes as Melina speaks of wielding destined death makes the connection even more explicit. Melina's knowledge and abilities further support this connection. She demonstrates intimate knowledge of Marika's will and the workings of the Golden Order, knowledge that would make sense for an Empyrean who once stood as Marika's rival. She can channel the power of runes to strengthen the player, an ability that parallels how the Gloam-Eyed Queen would have channeled the Rune of Death. She speaks of fire as her purpose, and what is black flame but a specialized form of fire. The game provides subtle hints about Melina's true nature throughout. In the shadow of the Erdtree expansion, Messmer's kindling speaks of a younger sister who had visions of fire, and Melina tells us she is daughter to Queen Marika, born at the foot of the Erdtree. But if Melina is Marika's daughter, why does no one else in the game acknowledge her existence? Why is she burned and bodiless, while all of Marika's other children remain corporeal? The answer might be that Melina is not who she appears to be, that her current form and identity are the result of transformation rather than birth. Consider this possibility. The Gloam-Eyed Queen, defeated by Maliketh, was not killed, but transformed. Marika, perhaps showing mercy, or perhaps seeing opportunity, stripped away the Queen's power and identity, remaking her into a new being, Melina. This would explain Melina's confused memories, her uncertain purpose, her existence between states. She is daughter to Marika not by birth but by rebirth, created from the remnants of a defeated rival. This transformation would serve Marika's purposes perfectly. Rather than making a martyr of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, she erased her entirely, replacing her with a servant who would actually help maintain the Golden Order by guiding Tarnished to become Elden Lord. The ultimate victory isn't killing your enemy, it's making them serve your cause without even remembering they once opposed it. But traces of the original identity persist. Melina's compulsion toward fire, her knowledge of destined death, her gloam-colored eye, these are fragments of the Gloam-Eyed Queen bleeding through the imposed identity of Melina. And in the frenzied flame ending, when faced with the complete annihilation of everything, that original identity reasserts itself. The Gloam-Eyed Queen believed in death as natural order, but the frenzied flame represents chaos and obliteration. Faced with this distinction, Melina the Queen reveals her true nature and vows to restore proper death to the world. This theory, while unconfirmed, explains numerous inconsistencies in Melina's story and creates a narrative through-line that connects the game's past and present. The Gloam-Eyed Queen isn't gone. She walks beside us throughout our entire journey, guiding us even as she struggles to remember who she truly is. Whether or not Melina is the Gloam-Eyed Queen, the Queen's influence on the lands between persists in undeniable ways. The Godskins, scattered and leaderless, continue their work across the realm. We encounter them in Dominula village, at the divine tower of the Urnia, in the depths of Volcano Manor, and most significantly, as a paired boss fight in Farum, Azula. Each encounter tells us something about how they've adapted to a world without their mother. The Godskin apostle at Dominula village has become an object of worship for the local population, who have adopted the practice of skinning and flaying as a religious observance. The village women dance endlessly in celebration of the apostle's presence, their faces frozen in disturbing smiles as they perform their grisly work. This shows how the Godskin religion has evolved from a targeted campaign against gods to a more general practice of ritualistic violence. Without the Gloam-Eyed Queen to direct them toward divine targets, the Godskins and their followers simply skin whatever they can find. The Godskin noble at the divine tower of Liurnia guards the tower where Rani's body lies, suggesting some connection between the Godskins and the Carian royal family. Perhaps they recognized Rani as a fellow enemy of the Golden Order, or perhaps they simply sought to claim the body of an Empyrean for their collection. Either way, their presence at such a significant location indicates they haven't simply been hiding in the shadows, but actively inserting themselves into the major events of the lands between. The paired Godskin duo in Farum Azula represents perhaps the most significant Godskin presence in the game. Farum Azula exists outside time, a place where past, present, and future blur together. The presence of Godskins here suggests their influence transcends temporal boundaries. They're not just remnants of the past, but eternal fixtures in the cosmology of the lands between. The fact that defeating one causes another to be resurrected by their companion demonstrates their unnatural persistence. Even without the Gloam-Eyed Queen, they found ways to cheat the very death they once served. The black flame incantations that players can learn and use represent another form of the Queen's lasting influence. The Godskin prayer book, found in Stormvale Castle, contains the knowledge needed to harness black flame, albeit in its diminished form. That this knowledge has been preserved and can be learned by anyone with sufficient faith demonstrates that the Queen's teachings weren't entirely suppressed. The black flame monks who abandoned their posts to follow the Godskins must have helped spread this knowledge, ensuring that the techniques of god-killing would never be entirely forgotten. The philosophical impact of the Gloam-Eyed Queen extends beyond her immediate followers and into the fundamental conflicts that drive Elden Ring's narrative. The game presents us with multiple characters and factions who question the Golden Order's removal of death. Rani seeks to overthrow the Order entirely. Fia champions those who live in death. The Dung Eater seeks to curse all beings equally. Each of these represents a different response to the same fundamental problem. The Gloam-Eyed Queen identified that Marika's age of immortality is unnatural and ultimately unsustainable. The Queen's crusade also raises uncomfortable questions about who the true villain of this story is. Marika removed death from the world, creating a system where she and her chosen could rule eternally without fear of natural endings. The Gloam-Eyed Queen sought to restore the natural cycle to ensure that even gods would face mortality. In most mythologies, death is not evil but necessary, a fundamental force that gives life meaning through its limitation. By this reading, the Queen was not a villain but a force of natural order fighting against an artificial eternity. The game seems to support this interpretation through its treatment of destined death. By the end of our journey, we must unleash destined death to burn the Erd-Tree and access the Elden Ring. Maliketh, who has guarded destined death so carefully, must be defeated for any ending to occur. The very thing Marika sought to suppress becomes necessary for any form of change or progress. The Gloam-Eyed Queen's vision of a world where death exists proves more sustainable than Marika's golden eternity. This connects to broader themes in Elden Ring about stagnation versus change, order versus chaos, control versus freedom. The Golden Order represents ultimate control, a system where Queen Marika determines who lives, who dies, who matters. The Gloam-Eyed Queen represented the chaos of mortality, where death comes to all regardless of status or divinity. Neither vision is entirely good or evil. They're different philosophical approaches to existence, each with benefits and drawbacks. The symbolism of the gloam itself, that twilight moment between day and night, perfectly encapsulates this philosophical position. The queen didn't represent pure darkness opposing Marika's light, but rather the transition between states, the liminal space where transformation occurs. Twilight is neither day nor night, but contains elements of both, just as death is neither pure ending nor pure beginning, but a transformation from one state to another. This twilight symbolism appears throughout Elden Ring in various forms. The eternal cities exist in eternal twilight beneath the earth. Farum Azula exists in a perpetual storm where the sun neither rises nor sets. The land of shadow itself is described as a place obscured from the Erdtree's light. These spaces of twilight and transition are where we find the deepest truths about the world, where the rigid categories of the Golden Order break down and reveal more complex realities. The Godskins' incorporation of serpentine characteristics connects to this theme of transformation in cycles. Serpents shed their skin, literally transforming themselves through a process of death and rebirth. The Godskins' ability to stretch and transform their bodies mirrors this serpentine nature, but they take it further by wearing the skins of others, by making transformation through death their religious practice. They embody the cyclical nature their queen championed, death leading to transformation, leading to new life. The connection to the crucible that the game mentions is particularly significant. The crucible represented primordial life before the Erdtree imposed order upon it, a chaotic mass of potential from which all life emerged. The Godskins' physical mutations echo the crucible's chaotic nature, suggesting that their queen's vision wasn't simply about death, but about returning to a more primal, natural state of existence where life and death flowed freely without artificial constraints. As we near the conclusion of this exploration into one of Elden Ring's deepest mysteries, we must consider what the Gloam-Eyed Queen means for our understanding of the game's world and themes. She represents the road not taken, the alternative to Marika's Golden Order that was violently suppressed, but never entirely eliminated. Every Godskin we encounter, every black flame incantation we cast, every piece of lore about destined death reminds us that Marika's victory was not inevitable, or necessarily right. It was simply the outcome that shaped the world we explore. The question of the Queen's identity, whether she truly is Melina, whether she survived in some other form, or whether she was completely destroyed, matters less than what she represented. She was the champion of natural order in a world that had embraced artificial eternity. She was the shadow cast by Marika's golden light, the inevitable response to any system that claims absolute power over life and death. In a game that constantly asks us to question the established order, to look beyond surface appearances to deeper truths, the Gloam-Eyed Queen stands as perhaps the ultimate example of suppressed truth. From Software's decision to leave her identity ambiguous is deliberate and meaningful. Like many of the deepest mysteries in their games, the Gloam-Eyed Queen exists more as idea than individual, more as concept than character. She is the death that was denied, the ending that was prevented, the transformation that was stopped. By leaving her story partially untold, the game invites us to consider what other truths might be hidden, what other alternatives might have existed, what other futures might have been possible. The evidence pointing to Melina as the Gloam-Eyed Queen, while compelling, ultimately serves to illustrate a larger point about identity and transformation in Elden Ring. Characters are constantly changing, assuming new roles, abandoning old purposes for new ones. Radagon is Marika. Ranni casts aside her Empyrean flesh to become something new. Godwyn exists as both dead and alive simultaneously. In this context, the idea that the Gloam-Eyed Queen could become Melina, that a goddess of death could become a guide for life, fits perfectly with the game's treatment of identity as fluid rather than fixed. The Godskins themselves embody this fluidity through their physical transformations and their persistence, despite their queen's defeat. They've adapted to a world without destined death, finding new purposes and new victims, yet maintaining their core identity as servants of death. Their presence throughout the lands between serves as a constant reminder that the old ways persist, that defeated ideologies don't simply disappear, but transform and adapt to new circumstances. The religious practices of the Godskins, the skinning, the wearing of flesh, the ritualistic use of black flame might seem unsettling and evil from our perspective, but within their theological framework, these were sacred acts. They were returning gods to mortality, stripping away the pretense of divinity to reveal the flesh beneath. Every skin worn was a theological argument made manifest. Gods are not fundamentally different from mortals. They simply have more power. Remove that power, apply destined death, and they become flesh like any other. This theological position has profound implications for understanding Elden Ring's cosmology. If gods can be killed, if divinity can be stripped away, then godhood is not an inherent quality, but a temporary state. The Gloam-Eyed Queen's crusade was as much philosophical as physical, challenging not just Marika's rule but the entire concept of eternal divine authority. She proposed a universe where everything, even gods, must eventually end and transform into something new. The game subtly supports this position through its multiple endings. In almost every ending, the old order is swept away and replaced with something new. Whether we become Elden Lord, follow Rani to the stars, embrace the frenzied flame, or choose another path, we are essentially completing what the Gloam-Eyed Queen began, ending Marika's eternal golden order and allowing transformation to occur. The Queen failed in her methods, but her fundamental insight, that stagnation disguised as order is unsustainable, proves correct. The black flame itself, even in its diminished form, carries this philosophical weight. It's not just a weapon but a statement. Death exists. Death persists. Death cannot be permanently denied. Every time a player uses a black flame incantation, they're channeling a tiny fragment of the Queen's vision, keeping alive the idea that even gods should fear mortality. The fact that these incantations remain effective, that they can still harm divine beings even without the full power of destined death, demonstrates the enduring truth of the Queen's position. Looking at the broader context of From Software's work, the Gloam-Eyed Queen fits into a pattern of characters who recognize fundamental truths that ordered societies seek to suppress. Like Aldea in Dark Souls 2, who saw through the cycle of fire and dark, or the Great Ones in Bloodborne, who exist beyond human comprehension. The Queen represents knowledge that threatens established power structures. Her defeat was not a rejection of her truth but a suppression of it, a violent insistence that some truths are too dangerous to acknowledge. The locations where we encounter Godskins often have symbolic significance related to death and transformation. Dominula village sits in a region associated with Miquella's Halictree, itself an attempt to create an alternative to the Erd Tree. The Divine Tower of Liurnia houses Rani's discarded body, a symbol of transformation through death. Volcano Manor is dedicated to overthrowing the Erd Tree through violence. Farum. Azula exists outside normal time and space. Each location represents some form of resistance to or transformation of the established order, suggesting the Godskins are drawn to places where their Queen's vision still resonates. The fact that we must face the Godskin duo to progress through Farum Azula is particularly significant. This battle isn't optional. It's mandatory for reaching Maliketh and ultimately completing any ending. The game forces us to confront the legacy of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, to face her orphan children who continue their work even without her guidance. Their presence at this crucial junction suggests that grappling with the Queen's legacy is essential to understanding and ultimately transcending the Golden Order. The Windmill village's transformation when we defeat the Godskin apostle there provides another layer of meaning. After the apostle's defeat, the village becomes covered in snow, the dancing stops, and the celebratory atmosphere disappears. This suggests that the Godskin presence, however grotesque, provided meaning and purpose to the villagers. Without it, they're left with nothing but cold and silence. This raises uncomfortable questions about whether the Queen's vision, violent as it was, offered something that Marika's order could not, a sense of purpose beyond simple obedience to golden light. As we reach the end of this deep exploration into the forgotten history of the Gloam-Eyed Queen and her devoted Godskins, we must acknowledge that many questions remain unanswered. Who was she before becoming the Gloam-Eyed Queen? How exactly did she acquire the Rune of Death? What was the exact nature of her defeat by Maliketh? These mysteries persist, and perhaps that's intentional. The Queen represents suppressed history, forgotten truth, erased possibility. Her incompleteness in the narrative mirrors her erasure from the world. Yet through careful examination of items, environments, and connections, we've painted a picture of one of the most significant figures in Elden Ring's history. The Gloam-Eyed Queen was more than just an enemy of Marika. She was the embodiment of an entirely different worldview, one where death was sacred rather than shameful, where gods were mortal rather than eternal, where transformation through ending was embraced rather than feared. Her Godskins carried this vision forward through grotesque but theologically consistent practices, maintaining the faith even after their goddess fell. The possibility that Melina is the transformed queen adds layers of tragic irony to our journey. If true, it means Marika's greatest enemy became her unwitting servant, guiding Tarnished to maintain the very order she once sought to destroy. Yet even in this diminished state, traces of the original purpose bleed through: the compulsion toward fire, the knowledge of destined death, the gloam-colored eye that opens when pushed to extremity. The Queen might be defeated, transformed, erased, but she is not entirely gone. Thank you for joining me in unraveling one of Elden Ring's deepest and most fascinating mysteries. The Gloam-Eyed Queen may have been erased from official history, but her story lives on through those who seek the truth beneath the golden facade of Marika's order. Every Godskin encountered, every black flame cast, every piece of lore uncovered adds another piece to this puzzle of suppressed history and forgotten divinity. If this exploration has given you new insights into the lands between and the complex web of power, death, and divinity that shapes its history, please subscribe to Keen 7 Lore for more deep dives into gaming's most intricate narratives. Share your own theories about the Gloam-Eyed Queen's identity in the comments below. Is she, Melina, transformed, a completely separate entity now lost to time, or something else entirely? Your perspectives and discoveries help build our collective understanding of these mysteries. Together, we continue to piece together the forgotten histories that shape our favorite game worlds, finding meaning in the margins and truth in the shadows. The Gloam-Eyed Queen's story reminds us that in Elden Ring, as in all great narratives, the most important truths are often the ones someone tried to hide. Until next time, fellow lore seekers, keep questioning what the gods would have you forget, and remember, in the twilight between absolutes, between gold and shadow, between life and death, the most profound truths await discovery.